Another day at this beautiful Mansfield Reserve in East Bowral, and looks like a pretty good place to start to profile this guy here. Now I just want to remind you, we've got Eucalyptus viminalis and Eucalyptus cypellocarpa here, and this is a typical viminalis sapling here. I've got a Eucalyptus viminalis video up. Just have a look at what we meant by the saplings, those strongly juvenile leaves. Here's another one over here for viminalis. It's really reliable, that juvenile leaf feature. But check out what's going on with these guys. And in this reserve, we've got a heap of Eucalyptus amplifolia, the cabbage gum. It'll happily hang out with viminalis in the Southern Highlands. We get it in Sydney as well. Check out the size of this leaf. Look at it. And I'm stretching my fingers to get over that leaf. I don't want to pull it off because it's so magnificent, but that leaf is easily 10 centimetres across. Just let me get my ruler. Check that out. Sorry, it's a bit muddy because I've been digging up soil with it. 130 mil across. Isn't that incredible? And it's probably about the same wide. Sorry, the same long. Hard to get an angle, but yeah, you get the idea. 130 by 130 or thereabouts. What a leaf. And that's what amplifolia can do in the juvenile stage. It'll throw up these saplings. The only thing I compare them to is something like Pterodocornis, forest red gum, but their leaves will be a bit more bluey. They're a bit more bluey green. I put a Pterodocornis video up from Western Sydney. They'll be a bit more bluey green. The other thing that I've had explained to me with amplifolia is if you look at these stems, they've got these prominent ridges. I just want to try and zoom in on that. You got these prominent ridged stems. Not all the time. I don't see it as often as I'd like, but this is a real distinctive one here. That's a really strong rib on the edge of the stem there. And that's another thing you go for with the juveniles. But it's just really green, really mid-green. Amplifolia does mean ample foliage. It does mean, you know, really big leaves in the juvenile phase. They're a little bit discolorous. It's a really cloudy, gloomy, cold day here today. Just can't get any sun. Just let me look at another one. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of discoloration. Might be hard to pick it up in this sunlight, but you can probably see that there. At least the juvenile leaves are discolorous. But probably one of the biggest juvenile leaves you're going to get, I reckon. Give or take. In amplifolia. Unbelievable, 130 by 130 mil. But there's a whole heap of saplings along here. And then I'll find some adult trees and we can have a really good look at it. Here's one here, which will probably do just to start with the trunk. The reason I'm in this reserve is a lot of eucalypts are dying off and I just want to get some that are healthy. The amplifolias aren't dying off, but some other eucs are. But yeah, what I like about the amplifolia trunk is most of it will be smooth. It'll have a real mottled, almost sometimes a bit of a spotted gum look to it. And I haven't got any sun to show it off, but I'll try at least to get into the direction opposite the direction the sun should be coming from. It's got a little bit of a spotted gum look to it, but that's what I also look for amplifolia. It just seems to have less of that tessellated bark that Pterodocornis throws. It doesn't tend to get the ribbons that viminalis gets. It can get sort of ribbons down the bottom here or fibrous ribbons. That sort of stuff going on. But it doesn't get those really long ribbons that viminalis gets. Just has that nice sort of white mottled trunk a lot of the time for most of its length, and that's what I look for with amplifolia, though it's not always helpful. The bark can vary a little bit, but it does tend to throw these nice colours through the bare sort of parts of the trunk. And then I'll get some adult foliage and get the fertile material we need. But if you look up at the canopy, it's just going from that juvenile leaves to these big, broad, mid-green leaves. And you won't be able to see those there, but we've got Eucalyptus carpa here, and I just made a video on those, but I would argue these adult amplifolias are sort of even fatter and shorter. They're sort of around the 10-15 centimetre mark, and they're looking about 5 centimetres wide. So they're just a bit shorter and fatter than carpa when that gets to this age. But I'll get some hands on some adult material and we can have a good look at it. This amplifolia is about 3-4 metres tall, and you can still see the big fat leaves on it. It's really good hint that you've got amplifolia around. The carpa saplings, they won't look like this. They'll have a much narrower, longer foliage moving towards that adult look. But these are well and truly still juvenile. And that sapling's about, yeah, I'd give it 3.5 metres, maybe 4. Just some of these leaves, again, they're easily hitting, 10 centimetres by about 10 centimetres wide. Here's a nice big amplifolia. Just check out, just the patterning on the trunk is what I like, just that patterning there. I can see the sort of semi-juvenile leaves, they're sort of broad and fat. There is a big carpa over there that I showed in another video. There's even a carpa sapling here, but this tree here is an amplifolia. And up and up it goes. It's a nice big one. It does have sort of undulating branches. It's a bit just in the style of maybe Angophora. It's got sort of undulating branches when they're big and old. And if I have a look here, I can see the buds. I can't quite get to them, but I can see the buds there, and I can see the fruit as well. But what I'll just point out again, look what it's doing with these saplings over here. And then I think I found some buds on the ground I can use. But check out this copse of saplings. It just gives you a really good indication on what sort of trees are around. We just got a whole copse here of amplifolia. Got those ridges on the stems again. So this is a really good species where you can really study the juvenile form, and it will help you. It'll help you a lot. We've just got a whole copse here. And I've seen amplifolia do this on a lot of sites. They're very good at sort of regenerating when the land's left alone and they're allowed to do their thing. They don't mind making halos around pretty old advanced trees. Let's have a look at these buds. I think I've got some at the base of this tree, which is really helpful. Can you believe that that's fallen down for me? How beautiful. And that's what I typically associate with amplifolia. Now, one of the things about it is it'll happily take the buds up to the 11 or 15 interval. They're in the 7 to 15 bracket. And it just seems that amplifolia will take them up to 11 or 15 a lot more often than Pterodocornis will. Now, that's not completely concrete, but in Western Sydney, Pterodocornis is sort of known for having buds in 7s a lot of the time. And amplifolia will take them up to the 11 to 15 mark, and it's well and truly doing it here. Pterodocornis can also take them to the 11s or 15s in some habitats. You just got to watch for that. But in Western Sydney, for example, you normally get Pterodocornis with 7. That's sort of a bit of a strong point to go for. And these amplifolia buds are pretty typical. They've got a really long operculum, sort of with a horned tip at the top, sort of a, well, they're already horned, looking like Pterodocornis, but they've sort of got that pinched tip at the top, that little beak, sort of looking like fingers sort of thing. They're nice. So the operculum is really long, typical red gum Pterodocornis blakeleyi operculum. Sort of well and truly the size of the hypanthium or longer. And then just look at that pinched little sort of hook at the top is another thing I go for amplifolia. So this is probably as good as we need to look at. I can count 11 on these, I think. Maybe some have fallen off. 12 maybe. Can't quite count today, but they're well and truly above 7. You can see there. They got a nice long peduncle, and each bud seems to have a nice definite pedicel as well before the hypanthium. So that'll probably do us for the buds of amplifolia. That's really what you got to look out for. They're quite nice, quite distinctive. Different to Cypellocarpa. They're very different. They got that real red gum shape. Let's see if we can find some fruit. Yeah, I just wish the sun was out to show off this chunk a bit more, but that's basically what you're getting. Just check out these patterns here. A bit like, maybe not quite punctata, but a bit like Pterodocornis in the way it throws that sort of pattern in. And I find amplifolia, it can sort of go really white. It can have a really white look to it, and then it has sort of deeper shades or grey shades. It can put on some really beautiful toning, but it's looking a little bit punctata, but not quite. It's just a different looking to the eye, and there's real little thin bits shedding off up there, and thin bits shedding off here in these sort of short ribbons. They can throw some really beautiful patterns, amplifolia. Trees of amplifolia everywhere, and just for getting my pole saw today, I've really struggled to find material. I can find the red gums difficult to get fertile material, especially when I've got my workshops coming up. They're just hard to get a lot of the time. But here's this nice curly drooping branch, can you believe it? And it's coming all the way down to the ground. And check it out, there's a heap of buds. So again, just to I'm about 200, 300 meters away from where I got the last buds. So just check those out again, pretty consistent. There's not a lot of variation, at least as far as I know, in the amplifolia buds. Just reinforcing that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's a cluster there and there's a cluster there, but well and truly over 7. But luckily enough, I've got the fruits and I'm really happy to have them. I don't have many, but they'll do the job. And that's what I associate amplifolia with a lot of the time. Just when they're in the ripening stage, they've got this really distinctive red valves, I should say. The red valves that are going to open up. They look very Pterodocornis-like. They look very river red gum-like. But they've got that steeply raised disc, a bit more raised than Pterodocornis. It's sort of more steeply raised. They're a bit smaller than Pterodocornis. These guys I'm holding are probably about 7 mil across. And if I get them at the right time, I see these red valves. Now, Pterodocornis might have that as well, you might argue, maybe it does, but I just really notice it on amplifolia, these red valves at the top. Sometimes they're really purple. And a very Pterodocornis look. They got genuine pedicels, genuine peduncle, and yeah, these fruits would be about, yeah, probably 6, 7 mil across and about that long. The valves are going to be exerted. They're sticking up there and are about to open. I just find they're smaller than Pterodocornis fruit. They're smaller a lot of the time, especially when they're in a bunch of, yeah, maybe 7 to 15. Here's some more over here. Really cheering that this branch has fallen down. Here they are here. Yeah, beautiful fruits, beautiful red gum fruit. And that's typically what you get. You can see there's only 6 there, but the valves are starting to open on this one. Nice and exerted on a raised disc. That's a typical amplifolia fruit. just not as, I just find they're not as big as Terraticornis. They might be, you know, the same size as Blakeleyi, and you have to watch out for that in some parts. I'm too far east to get Eucalyptus Blakeleyi here, but I'm so happy about this branch. It's just a bit of luck. I just wasn't getting anything, but just some of these amplifolias are beautiful. They're beautiful and big. They're real Titan amplifolias, sort of bigger than what I see in Sydney a lot of the time. They're just a nice big Titan tree. Just wish the sun was out to show that off. You can see the leaves here. They're just sort of on the fat and short side. They're not overly long, but what you should note with amplifolia is they can do this. They do become very Cypellocarpa-like or Terraticornis-like. So you go from that juvenile foliage, this is something I should have shown earlier, you go from that juvenile foliage into this really long lanceolate adult foliage. So just watch for that. You can get some really long leaves like this guy here, but very fat. Concolorous, they should be concolorous, just like in Terraticornis a lot of the time. That one's concolorous as well. Look at that leaf, just a really big leaf. So they are sort of looking Cypellocarpa. I do think the leaves look sort of different to Cypellocarpa. They've just got a slightly different venation and overall appearance to them. Maybe Cypellocarpa leaves look a bit more Tasmanian blue gum. These guys are pretty thick. They're on the thick side. They're not overly thin. I'd say they're sort of, if we've got a spectrum of 0 to 100 for thickness and thinness, these might be at about maybe the 70 mark or the 60 mark, or maybe around 70. Maybe I'll come up with a thickness grade with capitulata at the top and maybe something like Eugenioides or Angophora floribunda down the other end. But these are pretty thick, yeah, or thickish. I don't know if they have much of an odour. Yeah, there's not a lot there. It's pretty eucalyptus-y, but again, I always say my nose isn't the strongest, but they've, yeah, there's a good bit of eucalyptus just there. And when I crush them up, they're getting sticky. They're getting nice and sticky around the mid-vein. There's a lot of stickiness there, so maybe that's a helpful sort of ID feature as well. And just to finish on the range, Eucalyptus amplifolia, it's a New South Wales, Queensland tree, and it's sort of got a strong coastal distribution. It doesn't get into the tablelands a lot. It doesn't go too far west. I was collecting them once around Goulburn, and I was just a little bit out of Goulburn in New South Wales, and I was right on the western extent of the range. I could see I was right on the western extent of records. It goes down as far as Bega in New South Wales. There's a bit of a disjunct patch there around Bega. And then it comes north through Sydney, west to about Katoomba, around that area, Lake Burragarang, and then it's sort of, you can find it in the Hunter Valley, sort of west of places like Singleton and Broke, just slightly west. It's around Armidale. You'll find it around there, but you won't find it too much further west of, say, Armidale, and then it goes up into the Warwick area in Queensland, and it sort of peters out there, possibly getting up to around Toowoomba, but I think that's about the limit. So it's very coastal. It doesn't get into the tablelands much, but you do get it into the tableland fringes. And it likes the wet areas. It likes the wet ground. It's very boggy here today. We've got a creek line just down there. It's growing with Viminalis here. It does like the wetter creek lines a lot of the time. You can find it on dry hills, especially around the Goulburn area. I find it around Goulburn, Marulan on sort of drier hills and drier slopes. But by and large, even in Sydney, it likes a creek line amplifolia or a river flat, what we call a floodplain. If you want to find amplifolia, target the creek lines. That's the best way to find it quickly. So that's it for Eucalyptus amplifolia. Just, yeah, note that adult foliage, comparing it to the juveniles. Though they hold their juvenile leaves for a long time, like that sapling over there, that's now about 8 metres, but a lot of juvenile foliage there. They're beautiful trees, and there are some beautiful ones here in Mansfield. Just finishing off with a chunk of that one. Really nice.